Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigus.
I think I'm old enough to know better. I'd planned to meet my guests for today about 9:30. I've rocked up there at 8:30. I'm going fishing. I'm just excited. I've had a fantastic breakfast, sausage and bacon in a baguette, coffee, lots of fishing talk. I'm in Dorset. I'm on the Frome. I'm with John Aplin and John Grindle. John, it's great to have you back on the Fly Culture Podcast. How are you doing, buddy?
All right. Yeah, really good. Really good. Survived a very wet winter, the early days. Now it's been cold and dry for about 8 weeks. And the river's looking a bit skinny already. So we're going to all be wishing for rain again, which will end up in a disastrous start to the season because it will flood and be like chocolate. So, but we're looking forward to it. Spring's on its way. Daffodils are out. Snowdrops are out. Pike will be spawning any minute. And the grayling have just started spawning, and we've seen, fish in excess of £3 just cutting very shallow scrapes in the bed of the river, and so we might get to see some spawning grayling today. I know a lot of anglers, they just have never seen spawning grayling because it's done in the closed season. They're not out on the rivers doing anything. So hopefully today.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. And I think the plan, we were talking about it over breakfast, and one of my favourite days fishing, well, I'd say fishing, I didn't even actually fish. I turned up here and we were going to do an article for the magazine, online magazine I ran called Eat, Sleep, Fish. And both the Johns were here, and they said there's somebody staying at the accommodation that wants to come along with us. And it was only Tom Moran, the bamboo rod maker. And it was one of those moments where I sort of knelt down on all four knees and said, I'm not worthy. And we just walked the river, talked about fishing, talked about life and so much more. And it was one of those really, really special days. And what's the plan today, John? Are we going to do that? We're going to look out for some grayling, bit of walking the river. What's the plan?
Yeah, I reckon, because we've done quite a lot of stuff here over the years, Pete. So I thought we'd go over to the rod room, select a bit of kit, and then drive round to Bomston, which is some fishing that we've got that you haven't seen. And if we find the old grayling that's not even thinking about spawning, we might target that. But we'll have a good look at some other fishing, and we'll have plenty of idle fishing chit-chat, sat by the weir, something like that. Be good.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. And that's, you mentioned Bomston there, and that's, you have the accommodation here, you have the home beat. The wonderful thing I think about, and I've talked on the previous podcast that we've done as well, is that you've got just a wide variety of fishing for people at sensible pricing as well. And, we talked about communities and putting people together and the syndicates you put together at affordable pricing. That's really, really important to you, isn't it?
100%. That's the way. So it's been our philosophy for, 37, 38 years since we've been running chalk stream fishing. And I just want to bring lots of people together at an affordable price. And, our little syndicate, we've got 5 different little beats, tiny streams, amazing wild fishing. It's 200 quid or something for the year. And it's brought loads of beginners, people that have wanted to fish chalk streams but never been able to. And they've started, and, I've got some old friends actually that go back many, many years that have been fishing. They said it's some of the best fishing they've ever had, and they've fished, all their lives. So, yeah, it's great. And we'll talk about Chalk Stream Club as well, that we've all pulled together and run over the last 10 years or whatever. It's 13 years, I think. But we'll go out to the rod room now, get some kit and bugger off to the river.
So we slipped into our waders, and we were out where we parked the cars, and John had talked about his rod room, and I saw sort of a shed just in the background, and I thought, I wonder if that's it, it's going to be. And he's walked us back up next to where the accommodation is, and we've walked in, and I reckon there's probably getting on for 100 rods here of just about everything, from about, it looks like in fly rods from a 1 weight up to 12 weight rods with tarpon lines set up. There's photographs, there's paintings, there's nets, there's probably 10 pairs of waders. extraordinary looking place, John. This, as I said, I was so, you know how polite I am, and I saw the shed by where the cars are parked and thought that was it. It's certainly not that, is it? You must be incredibly proud of this.
I am. I mean, rods go back here from when I started fishing before I was 10. And all my course fishing, everything, big game stuff. And you know, I sat in here with Libs a little while ago. We had a whiskey, and I said to her, I said, pick anything in this room, Libs, and I'll tell you a story about it. Anyway, she picked 2 things and then went back into the house.
Yeah, that was several hours later, I guess.
Yeah. It's like, I can't hear any more fishing stories, Dad. But it's great. Our guests love it. They chuck all their wet wading gear in and rods, and there's a comfy chair. They can sit and have a whiskey after a day on the river. Yeah, it's great. I love sitting in here.
And I've just seen that sort of, I don't know if I take that as a sign or not, but I've seen sort of an outline of a great big grayling on the wall. Do we take that as a positive?
Very much so. Very much so. Yeah, we're blessed. We have got 1 and 2 monster grayling here. Thank goodness. Let's go and find the river, shall we?
Let's do it. So we just pulled up, and the river here is beautiful. I often talk about chalk streams and the ability to see the fish, and the Frome is no exception. I think John Grindle has just spotted a fish. I can see him pointing at something, but there's a beautiful run here. It's sort of, the river splits a little bit here, actually, and you know, you can see the chalk. As John says, the river's relatively low because, you know, the rain hasn't been around for quite some time now. It is probably, I would say, it's about 45, 50 feet wide. And you're looking over water meadows. There's some trees, there's some willows. The flow of the water is often can be deceptive. I can see, you know, a relatively nice pace to it. The idea is that John's going to set up a tight line or Euro nymph setup. I'm going to set up a rod with an indicator, and we're going to see how you get on. But John, can you tell us whereabouts are we now on the Frome?
We're about 2.5 miles downstream of Dorchester, below a little hamlet or a tiny village called Lower Bockhampton, right in the middle of Hardy country. Can't get any more in the middle of Hardy country than we are. On the banks of our beloved River Frome. So our Bompston Fly Fishers Syndicate. We have 2 rods per day, apart from Thursdays, which we keep for ourselves and any guests. Nice. Actually, I'm not even sure what that wind is. It's westerly, isn't it? But it's freezing.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of a chill to it. And I guess that's one of the things I always remember from this part of the world. I guess because of these water meadows and everything else, the wind does whistle across them, doesn't it?
It always seems to be windy down here. Yeah, I'm just hoping and praying that we don't have consistent easterlies for April, May and June like we've had for the last 3 or 4 years. There's nothing worse than cold mayfly fishing.
No, absolutely. And one of the things I wanted to ask you was, we're coming to the back end of your season now for grayling, certainly. You know, often I'm talking on here about getting excited about the start of the season, but how long do you shut down for?
Well, I suppose technically, because we allow our members to fish on until March the 14th for the grayling. So there's a 2-week shutdown until April the 1st. So that's it, 2 weeks closed. So if you've got a year's membership, that's not bad really, is it?
No, not at all. And that's kind of fun because, you know, we often sit here and think about how long the winter is at home and how we can't fish. And certainly on our rivers in Devon, they can often get washed out. But that's not bad. 2 weeks. I think I could probably cope with that just fine. So if you're a regular reader of Fly Culture, you may have noticed, I think it was in one of the winter editions, some beautiful close-up images of grayling. I think it was a fin and the grayling scales as well that were absolutely beautiful. They were taken by John Grindle, who's with us on the river today, and he's been a constant on the Frome, been fishing it for many, many years. John, it's great to see you as always. What does the Frome mean to you as a river?
Well, the Frome, I first fell in love with the Frome when I was about 10 or 11. I'm from Weymouth originally, and I used to cycle up, typical little bottle of water and something to eat, find my way to the Frome. And that little stream, as you came out of West Stafford and you looked left, that's where I used to catch minnows and sticklebacks and take them back to Weymouth for my tank. So that's where my love for the Frome came. And then I moved up to Dorchester a long time ago and became a member of the Dorchester Fishing Club and never really looked back.
And I remember you were with us on that magical day with Tom Moran as well. And the river here is looking absolutely as stunning as that section of river was as well. We're sort of standing on a bridge at the moment, and you can't hear anything. There's no road noise. There's absolutely nothing at the moment. Yet we're looking down into the river, trying to see if we can seek out and find a grayling. And do you still get excited, although you've been fishing the Frome for as long as you have? Do you still get excited about being here?
Oh, always excited, yeah. It's just, like you say, in the quietness. The Dorchester Fishing Club, there are stretches where it can be noisy, but I know a few that I can sneak away and find a quiet spot or two and find a beautiful wild trout that the Frome is renowned for, and of course the big grayling, which hopefully you'll get one today.
We'll have a try. Well, I can't. It's, as I said, standing on the bridge is fantastic, but John's going to take us upstream. You were saying, John, well, I heard you say in the background that you said ranunculus was growing already.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I was panicking slightly a week or two ago, thinking, oh my God, if we haven't got any weed to hold this diminishing water level back, we're going to be in trouble come the spring. But it's growing. And probably in a month or two's time, we'll be cursing it because we'll be cutting.
Does that mean that because weed cutting is quite an exact science, isn't it? It's not you're just cutting it to stop it from growing. As you've said there, you're cutting it to, dependent on water height and everything else, to control the water as well, isn't it?
Yeah, correct. I mean, we don't do a checkerboard cut or anything scientific on the Frome. We just keep the water moving in places, hold it back in places. But obviously, importantly, somewhere somebody's fly can actually land on the water.
Lovely. And what's the plan? We're going to walk upstream, right?
Yeah, we're going to walk upstream towards the hatches. There's some glides and pools. The river's crystal clear, so hopefully we can sight fish or at least see one or two huge Frome grayling.
That would be really cool. Like I say, the setup, John has got a Euro setup, a tight line setup with a beautiful Ari Heart reel by the looks of it as well. That looks absolutely stunning. I've got one of my Bannister CTS rods, and I'm not fishing bamboo today, and I've got a couple of nymphs, and I've got a New Zealand yarn indicator. So I'm going to see what happens. But it may be the case that the indicator doesn't come into play, and because, as John says, the water is so crystal clear, that it may be that we see the fish take and react on that rather than an indicator dipping under. So we'll wait and see if we can find a fish. One of the lovely things is having two people who know this bit of the river so well. And in on our near bank here, there's like a fastish sort of run coming across or down the edge of the bank and then out towards the middle before it hides under or escapes under the bridge. And I sort of thought, well, perhaps they might be there. And then John sort of politely pointed out there's a flat bit of water there. Aim into that spot there. So I put a couple of casts in there. John's got the slightly heavier metal. I've just been, is that all right? I'm sort of fishing from the bank, or would I be better getting in?
No, absolutely. Yeah, fish from the bank. It's I suppose the lovely thing about grayling is quite often they don't spook that much. So you can get fairly close to them. And if you do spook them, just quietly just wait for them to come back. That's, some of the guys, some of these monster fish, they'll almost spook them on purpose and then get into the river and get sort of ready for when they come back, because the fish, I'm sure, think, right, there's no one there now. And then they quite often, they'll come back. I mean, an amazing story. It was a couple of summers ago. Guy who fishes with us, he spent quite a long time on a fish that he thought might have gone £4. And he got into situ, this fish came back, he hooked it. After several fly changes, the fish powered 20, 30 metres upstream and he had to follow it. It then came off. You can imagine he was a bit distraught, so he just sat back in the spot and sort of gathered his thoughts. And the fish dropped back and he chucked the fly at it and it took it, and it was £4.1, this fish.
That is absolutely extraordinary. Yeah, and this, as you well know, it's not a size thing for me per se as an angler, but this is the history of the Frome and sizable grayling is one that's lasted a very, very long time, hasn't it? And rightly so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and we've had, grayling, they don't live a very long time. The British record of fish of 4.4, a friend of mine caught a few years ago. We actually read a scale on that fish, and it was 6 years old. So you only need a couple of bad recruitment years, which we've had, and we'll have more. So the population of grayling sort of plummets, if you like. This winter, after what can only be several very good recruitment years, we've had a lot of £2 plus fish, and just this last week or so we've had some really nice 3-pounders, 3.3, 3.4 and a 3.5. So they're there, amazing fish, and the season's now petering out, but we're trying to make the most of today.
And these fish, like you say, it's a short time they live, but they get so big. Is that a function of the food that's in the river? Does that mean it's a lot of shrimp they're eating? I remember years back when I've been fishing here, I was picking a lot of caddis up as well. Is it that there's a lot in there, or are they eating bigger stuff as well? Do they eat other fish?
Do you know, I think they do. I mean, you do a very quick kick sample, which I get a lot of our anglers to do. And, even a 3-second kick sample, and your net's just crawling with caddis and gammarus and olives and, everything, even little earthworms that crawl out of the bank. It's, it's phenomenally rich with food. And I also think that grayling have a little bit of predatory instinct about them. I can remember seeing a fish actually up on the clubboard I was watching, and I don't. It just happened so quickly. It lit up like a sailfish, smashed all these minnows into the shallows, and then went back on the sort of fin as if nothing had happened. And I've seen that. I've seen that happen a couple of times. It's quite extraordinary. In fact, I a few summers ago, I put a big streamer on to try in this big hatch pool, and I was just lifting this streamer out, and this grayling lit up like a sailfish again, smashed this great big conehead woolly bugger that I shouldn't have had in my fly box. And it was a £3 plus fish, and I was desperate to get a picture with this streamer in this fish's mouth, because it was barbless. The fish flipped over and swam off and left the streamer in the weed. That would have been a picture I'd have been proud of.
And that's it. I guess you've figured out my train of thought, that thinking about fish and everything else. And it just goes to show, doesn't it, that some of these things you assume that, a shrimp or a pink shrimp has become more popular in recent years, squirmy worms and stuff like that. But there are other things that are going to potentially come into play if the rules allow it, to be able to find these. And I guess in some respects as well, the visual aspect, like you say, seeing a fish light up and hit something like a streamer must be pretty damn exciting, particularly as it's on a chalk stream, because you see everything as it unfolds.
Yeah, it was quite amazing. It made me jump, that's for sure. And you wonder, when we're delicately nymph fishing and stuff, whether that grayling, huge fish is just looking up and thinking, just give me a streamer. I shouldn't say that.
Give me a quarter pounder, right?
You got it. Something worth eating.
There's been a little trickle of what looks like some large dark olives come down the river. We've been sticking with the setups that we've had. I've had a really small but beautiful grayling and a few trout as well. And I was trying to figure out what had happened, whether the trout had moved up with the hatch just a little bit and were a little bit keener to feed. John thinks perhaps there's a chance that the grayling are starting to think about spawning and they've moved out of some of the honey holes, as he calls them. But it's just a beautiful bit of river. Again, there's another carrier coming into the river where we're looking. I can see chalk in front of me. The water's really, really clear. I actually heard something. I heard a noise for the first time in ages, and I just lost myself really in the river and the fishing itself. And it is a truly stunning bit of water and is looking fantastic. As I said, we're off the mark with the grayling, but it's taken some work, and I kind of like that as well, that it would be lovely to connect with a beautiful grayling. I'm not particularly bothered by that, but obviously the fame of this river is associated with the grayling, but I don't think that matters too much. It is just a beautiful piece of water to enjoy. And I'm sort of, part of me now, the wind's blowing, it's cold, I just about feel my feet. But part of me is thinking, I wonder what it looks like in summertime where the fish are rising. And you can sort of picture in your mind's eye that you're sort of seeing the river at its barest, and probably not its most beautiful. It's beautiful, but in a different way. But when there's leaves on the tree, when the sun's out, where it's warm, where you're in a t-shirt and you see a fish rise, and that's what I kind of picture as well. But do I like it? Yes, I do, very, very much. So I was just describing where a little carrier comes into the main river. The main flow, so the main river's to our left as we look upstream. The carrier's coming in from the right. There's a bubble line coming. We're sort of stood, John and I are in the river, and John Grindle's to my left just on the bank. And the flow's sort of coming down almost in front of where we're standing. We're standing out about 3 or 4 feet, and there's a very defined and clear bubble line coming down towards us, and we're sort of probably shin deep at the moment, not very, very deep. But what's your thinking? John's got the rod at the moment. What's your thinking?
Well, I'm thinking it's cold. No, like Pete says, this bubble line, as you were describing the bubble line, I was just thinking 3 months ahead of myself with rising fish in this bubble line, olives, mayfly coming down. Can't wait for that. But I mean, at the moment, there's a slight dent where the this little carrier comes in as well. So I'm thinking maybe some of the grayling have moved out of the deeper holes. They're thinking about spawning. So, if we see fish that are looking like that, we're obviously not going to target them. But it would be nice to see something. So we're just going to wade up, fish the slightly deeper bits. I mean, I say deeper. There's a dent of an extra 6 inches that might hold a fish. So we'll see.
Great, and John's got the rod. He's got my rig with the 2 nymphs and indicator on at the moment. But yeah, it looks just right. I think I can see the dent that he's talking about. It's probably 20 feet ahead of us, and just where the bubble line, the outside edge of the bubble line. So I guess it's going to pop into there, and we're going to give it a go and see what we can find. Sometimes things go as you planned, and knowing your water and the spots, and that little pot that John talked about, just flipped his fly in there, and for a brief few seconds we saw the shake of a grayling that had eaten the nymph and just sadly came off. But that was just knowing your water, it was that pot, the hunch that John had talked about, and lo and behold, it came home to roost and didn't stick. But it's lovely to see somebody who knows their water and calls something like that, and lo and behold, it plays out. It didn't play out with the fish in the net, but that didn't matter too much. We could all see the fish. How big was that, John? It was a good fish, wasn't it? £1.5. £1.5, he reckons. So, but we got you could see the fish, that shake, that moment, which was wonderful. Another sweet pool, and John's fishing from the bank. There's a deep pot that he's tied on something really heavy, just to run down the pot, just to see what's going on. I'd fished up through it and had a small grayling, which I was really, really pleased about. John was fishing just downstream. You're warming your feet up, yeah?
Yeah, it's pretty cold. There's downstream winds really chilling us off now. Time for a coffee, I think.
It's almost time for that at the moment. It's just such a nice pool. It's hard to leave. Yeah. And, I've fished I've had a 5 mil on tungsten, as well as a 2 on the dropper as well. So I've been trying all sorts of bits and pieces. It may be that the weather's coming cold again. I don't know. Like John said about the spawning as well, perhaps fish are starting to think about other things now. But like I've said before, it doesn't detract at the moment. We'll keep cracking on and seeing what we can find. As I said, I've been catching some grayling, so I'm perfectly happy. Just as I'm speaking, another olive flitters by, so it's encouraging to see that sort of stuff happening as well. And it's just looking awesome. We're standing on a bridge, just looking down into the river. It's archetypal chalk stream, relatively shallow, small little clumps of ranunculus, and absolutely crystal clear. It's beautiful, John, and you brought us here for a reason.
Well, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that we're going to see some grayling spawning. It's something not a lot of anglers have seen, because obviously it's sort of in the close season. But I was just telling Pete that my birthday's on the 20th of March, so a few years ago we had an eclipse, and there's nobody fishing, close season. I came over with a flask of coffee on my own, experienced this amazing eclipse, and then when light levels got back to some sort of normality, I just leant on this bridge that we're leaning against now, and there were grayling spawning. And I had my camera with me, but I had no tripod or anything. So I ran back to the house, got a tripod, came over, set everything up on sort of video mode, and then just filmed these grayling. These are £3 plus fish that were just going through the motions, spawning. It was the first time I'd really seen it properly, but it was mind-blowing. And the colours of these fish were, as I've said before to Pete, they were like sailfish that were lit up. The colours on them were amazing. When I looked at the footage, there was no filters to add in colour or anything. I mean, it was just mind-blowing. And then over the next week or so after that, we had upwards of 20 or 30 massive grayling just spawning. And the males, they go black and they drape their dorsal over the female whilst they're going through the motions. I mean, it's rather beautiful, I've got to say. And then they sprinkle their eggs all over the loose gravel, quite often at the tail end of a sea trout red or a salmon red that they cut earlier in the winter. So yeah, an amazing sight. Very privileged to see that.
And it would be really cool. It's something I've never experienced before. And as anglers, we think of open season, closed season, and of course fish never know that it's open season or closed season. They're just living to the rhythm of nature, really. And it would be really cool we may experience it today, we may not, but to see these sorts of things. And even on my home river, I've walked the river, and it's one of those things you always promise yourself that you're going to do, and then don't do it enough. And then, as we've been talking, as we're walking up the river today, time marches on really quickly. And particularly that we had those 2 lockdown years, really, that you have to add 2 on to everything that you think about because everything's marched on. But on our local river, I will sometimes go up and see if I can find the salmon on reds and, fish that I've thought about a lot. I've tried my utmost and failed miserably at to try and catch as well. But that aspect of it as well, away from the fishing, is an important part, and to experience some of that would be deeply, deeply cool. One of the things we've been talking about as well is where grayling are holding, and how chalk streams are different to certainly the streams I fish for grayling at home. But one of the conversations I often have with people is about back eddies, and how we like to target trout in a back eddy, and particularly when they're rising. But John, what are your thoughts regarding grayling and them holding in back eddies on the river? Is that something you think much about?
I think probably, I don't have much experience with huge rivers further north, but I'm sure they hold in the big back eddies. But these little ones we get on the chalk streams that are super difficult to fish, I don't know if they hold up in those as much, but when you go later in the year, spring and summer, when you've got a big wily old brown trout just facing the wrong way in a river in that back eddy, sipping whatever down, then it's a real challenge. And there's 2 ways of going about it, really. You can just think, I'm fishing upstream, I'll just try and chuck a fly across to that and put in whatever mend you can to give a split second. Sometimes that works, but more often than not, you just think, I should have just prepped a little bit better for that one. So you just approach it looking downstream and try and fish it from behind the fish. I love that. It's a real challenge, and occasionally it works, and it's seriously it's super cool.
Nice. And while you're talking about that, for people, if they're coming down to grayling fish, obviously trout, I guess, is slightly more self-explanatory. But if people haven't fished, what's the advice when people come and stay with you? What sort of advice? I know the first thing you'll say is enjoy yourself first and foremost. But is there any advice that you give people when they're coming down to fish the Frome for the first time?
Yeah, fish it slowly. However slowly you fish, add 100 slower bits onto that. If you're shuffling at, a millimetre an hour up the river, you're fishing it too quickly. You've got to slow right down. Spend a lot of time looking, watching. The fish are there. You've just got to be patient. That's my advice to most people that come. Just slow your fishing right down.
Nice. And one of the interesting things you said to me as well was about, John had got in upstream and he did some fishing just behind him. It just doesn't bother you following someone up the pool, really?
No, completely happy to fish up after somebody. I like to think they're not going to catch all the fish. And occasionally you think, right, okay, I'm fishing up. They're shuffling as they go upstream. Therefore, any fish around you could be induced into feeding. And, if somebody fishes up during the trout season, they could fish up, go home, and then all of a sudden there's a hatch and they've finished their fishing and you're in the right spot. So it's, I'm happy to fish up with people in front of me. No worries.
Just as we walk along here, it just dawns on me that, this is your back garden, John, really, isn't it? And you spend so much time here. Do you feel incredibly lucky? Do you ever tire of walking up here and seeing this beautiful stream? Never tire.
The enthusiasm's still there. I first, as I said to Pete years ago, I first fished here when I was 10. I'm 56 in a couple of weeks, and I still love it as much as I did then. Yeah, it's mind-blowingly beautiful, and to be able to look after it and walk it and fish it occasionally is a real privilege.
And it must be, when you have people come and stay or people come and fish, there's that, I guess, that little bit of pride of home water, isn't it? That you always want it to perform for them. You always want people to have a good day and love it like you do.
100%. It's just, I feel very lucky to be able to share it with people and people that come and enjoy it and love it as much as I do. It's awesome.
I can see why John, the advice he gave about taking your time, because you can walk up the river and think, oh, there's nobody here. If you rush up the river, and then just if you stand quietly, stand still and watch, then the river gives its clues to you and somebody appears.
Dropping back.
Just been walking up again, and as I was just saying about, spotting fish and taking your time, and John's just spotted a grayling. It's just shifting downstream as they do. How big's that, John? That's a big fish, isn't it?
Big 2, I expect. Big 2. I think it's a male fish. It's quite dark. And there's obviously a smaller female just sat. Looks like they've been shifting a tiny bit of gravel about. You can just see them just dropping back under that load of willow that's in the river. Look at that. And then just... Oh, that's interesting. So they're now sat on that cleaned gravel. I reckon they've been starting to cut a little shallow red there. Yeah, cool.
John had mentioned that just a few paces behind, but that's interesting, the colour of the grayling as well, the male grayling. You said they get really dark spawning time. It may be, do you think then that, we've seen here as well, and, we've been catching some grayling, but do you think that may be why the bigger fish may be turning their attentions to other things now?
I think so, 100%. Yeah, definitely. It's getting to spawning time. End of February, early March, off they go. Yeah, good.
It's lovely to see, and lovely just to see that fish just drift down. And I guess on our way back, we may even get a look just to see if there's any more activity in that area that John had mentioned. And we were just talking about, grayling and how they like stable weather. We think, it's not said with deep knowledge, but perhaps a bit of experience. And we've had the weather shift around a little bit, and I think we got some shitty weather coming in now as well. I think snow's hitting further up country later today. I don't know if those things, do you buy into that and the fish's behaviour, John, how weather affects them, that they like stable conditions, or what is your take on it?
I think they love a bit of stability, like all of us. Yeah, I think a change in the weather. I mean, traditionally people love a good hard frost to get out for the grayling, and then they all whiz out on the first frost of the year, and the grayling are thinking, hang on, it's all changed. I'm not going to feed heavily until we've had 10 frosts on the trot and it's settled. So I think, yeah, bit of stability. We come up with a lot of theories in fishing, and then something will happen the day after to undo all of our theories. So I think it's important just to, just go fishing.
And you said to me earlier, didn't you, that nobody knows really, do they? We do our best endeavours to try and figure stuff out, and by spending time on the river. And I think that's why it's important, people like yourself, that you're seeing the behaviour of these fish every 365 days a year, so you have a pretty good understanding of what's going on. And we can almost sometimes anthropomorphise fish to fit how we think that they behave, but we don't really know, do we?
No, we don't. No, I mean, prime example, I think, is John went fishing a couple of weeks ago, sat on the beach trying to catch a bass or a cod, and then messaged me. He said, "Do you want some fresh mackerel?" So I rang him immediately. I said, "What are you talking about?" And John, say what happened.
I was sat on the beach, and I was the only person I could see on Chesil Beach. Nobody else about, which is always a bit of a worry when you go fishing there, because obviously they probably know better than me. But I could see these birds working, and as they got closer, I thought, well, nobody's going to see me put a set of mackerel feathers on, so I don't going to look a complete idiot. Well, first cast out, I brought in 4 mackerel, then another 4, then another 4, and I thought, that's enough. John will have a few, I'll have a few, and they tasted absolutely superb.
That's nice, and I like that. That's really good fishing, isn't it? Understanding the species that you're actually going after, seeing that you'd seen birds work in the water and putting 2 and 2 together, ringing the changes, like we've tried to do today as well, isn't it? That you figure out how you think things may be, how you need to get your flies on the deck. Are they on the deck? Do you need to change things? Do we shift where I've got the indicator? Those sorts of things. But that's a prime example of it, isn't it? That everything, if you're observant enough, unfolds and tells you exactly what's going on, doesn't it?
Yeah. I'm still amazed that I caught them in February, but you just got to keep your eye out, see what's happening, and adapt to conditions.
John's wandered upstream to see if he can find a grayling. He looks like a man on a mission, and I think he's hopefully going to find us one. And seeing those sort of initial signs that perhaps a red had been cut there and the dark grayling and everything else. But I talked at the very beginning about John Grindle and his love affair with fishing, but also photography, and you're really getting into it. I really, as I said, when I saw those images that you'd taken a winter time, I think a few years back, I said, if you've got anything of grayling, let me know. And lo and behold, you had some. That's been kind of fun, and a fun. I think often photography and fishing, for some reason, go together. Fishing's very photogenic, isn't it? And is that an attraction for you?
Well, yes. Well, as fishermen, we end up in. I thought I was a fisher. We end up in the most beautiful parts of the world. Part of that, I've fished rivers all over the world now, and I've got pictures of rivers. And it was a couple of things happened the previous year of that. One, I was talking to Peter McLeod of Arkvad McLeod, and he was talking about these old Soviet lenses that you get this beautiful bokeh. That's the fuzzy bits round a photograph. And he said, buy one of those and you can put them onto a modern camera and it looks like a film camera and it looks really nice. I thought, that sounds good. And then I was at a presentation at the Bridport Camera Club about a guy doing abstract photographs of Chesil Beach, and because of the Jurassic Coast and all that, and I thought, I could do that. Where could I do that? Where could I combine these two things? And I thought, along the banks of the river. What else? And that's how it started, really abstract photos along the river that things a lot of people don't actually see. Well, they see, but they don't really absorb them. And I've really enjoyed it, and I've carried on. And this little Soviet lens really gives a film-like quality. And they're not sharp. They're certainly not sharp, all the photos, but I just love doing it. And it adds something to when the fish aren't biting. You can go and rummage in the undergrowth and find a photo to add to your collection.
That's kind of cool, and you post your pictures up, don't you, as well? So I see those from where can people see those?
Well, I'm on Instagram as @JohnGrindle. I suppose that's the best place to see them. I haven't taken many this year. I'm drifted into black and white, and I've been taking pictures all morning in black and white monochrome. So we'll see what those come out like.
And I've seen the stuff that you've been putting off around the beach, or putting out, around the beach, and that's nice and moody in a good way, isn't it?
Yeah, my sort of photography has really changed. I was doing a lot of food photography a few years ago, and that's drifted. Now I'm doing really sort of high contrast black and whites, long shutter speeds and things like that. And being close to the sea, you've got lots of rocks and crashing waves. Yeah. I have to get some slow pictures of John fishing because he's such a slow mover.
Yeah, it's worth checking John's pictures out. So just chatting to John Grindle, and I could see John had stopped moving, and we're sort of looking at a tree that's overhanging the river here, and there's a little dip. There's sort of the typical chalk stream bottom, but there's a bit that is a little bit more sandy, and there's just a little riffle. And have you seen something, John?
Yeah, I was staring into some tree roots, and then a biggish dark male grayling, maybe 2.5 plus, just sort of, well, I spooked it sadly, and it's just sat in some very riffly water. You can just make it out, and hopefully it might, if we stand quietly for a bit, it might just drop back onto the red that it started to shift a bit of gravel on.
And like John says, if you just, I took some spotting and I can just make it out. And like I said, these are amazing fish, but it's not a special fish for here. It is a beautiful fish, don't get me wrong. But yeah, it's just wonderful to be able to see. So we found some grayling, John. We caught some grayling, and the bigger guys didn't come out to play. But as the podcast has been recorded, the story's unfolded, hasn't it? That it looks as though their attentions are going elsewhere. But as always, it's great to catch up with somebody who's so positive, is doing good things for fly fishing, and like I said at the beginning, making chalk stream fishing more available for more people, and that I can only champion, and I'll continue to do that. But it's been just wonderful to see your backyard. Just a little bit jealous.
Thanks, Pete. Yeah, it's been a great day. Just ambling, wandering, chatting fish and fishing and chalk streams and rivers and everything that goes with it. Yeah, it's amazing. So our contact details, chalkstreamflyfishing.co.uk. Come and say hello.
And also, as aside from that, you run your Chalk Stream Club, which is I think it's once every few months, isn't it? And also all your syndicates, if there's spaces in there, if people want to apply for those, how do they find those? And tell us about your Chalk Stream Club as well.
Well, the Chalk Stream Club it's something a bunch of us have wanted to do for a long, long time, just bringing like-minded people together. So it's in West Stafford Village Hall. We have guest speakers and a nice buffet. It's free to attend, and it's brought hundreds and hundreds of like-minded people together over the last 10 or 12 years that we've been doing it. We meet in the winter once a month on a Friday night. It's fabulous. There's no committees. It's free to get in. Have a look on the website and come and meet some friendly people.
And that to me says a little bit about John, or a lot about John, that, and I feel the same about fishing, connecting people together. It's really important to me, and clearly to John as well. And lastly, we touched on the syndicates and things. If you have spaces, where should people find you?
Yeah, on the website. Ping us an email, give us a phone call. It's always nice to chat fishing.
And the beat I saw today, we're now sort of at the one at out the back of John's place, but the one that we fished today is the first time I've seen it, and it's a beauty, absolutely stunning. And yeah, one day I'll be back. I think it was fantastic. But John, thank you again for being such a wonderful host. Thank you for the coffee. Thank you for the sandwiches. It's been great to see you both as always, and hopefully I'll see you very, very soon.
Cheers, Pete.
Cheers, Pete.
Thanks again for listening to the Fly Culture podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this one as much as me. As ever, there will never, ever be any charge for these. They're always free to download. And if you haven't, there's over 160, nearly 170, I think, episodes that hopefully you enjoy. I always try and mix up the content for you. And today's been a lovely example of that we've, just chatted really about grayling and the river and everything that goes with it, and the fun that you have in the company of good fishing friends. But there'll be plenty more episodes of the Fly Culture podcast coming soon.
The Fly Culture podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.